Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Beyond Access series. We're excited to be here today. We're excited to have Kristen DeAndrea here. I was going to share with us some amazing information. Kristen, you're an occupational therapist, right? And if you've been to the Beyond Access series before, she's a familiar face. She's done a lot of sessions around sensory strategy. So we're just really excited to have her here again. Before we get into that, I want to turn it over to Ori to give us some housekeeping announcements.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending another Beyond Access session. As always, we're just going to go over a couple of housekeeping notes with an announcement as well. As a general reminder, as always, the chat function for this session is obviously off, but as always, the Q&A function is enabled, so you'll be able to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try to answer as best as we can, but we do set a time at the end of the session here to make sure that we can go through the questions and answer them throughout the end of the session here. Now, as always as well, don't worry if you missed anything, if you hop on late, we do record all of these sessions and we're going to post them onto our YouTube page, the Beyond Access series, the following day. So please look out for that, and we'll be sending an email as well. And obviously, if you don't follow, go on and give us a follow on YouTube. We would really appreciate it. Also, just an announcement here. We do have Beyond Access scheduled for the rest of this year. I just want to make sure everyone is aware that we're going to have two sessions on self-regulation techniques and summer movement. But in May, we're going to also be focusing on the IEP process, the IEP, what it is, understanding it, the process, and preparing for the IEP meeting. Now, but for tonight, we are very excited to be welcoming, as Jose said, Christine DeAndrea, an occupational therapist who's going to help us with motivators of behavior and tips on how best to respond. So she's going to be identifying some different functions of behavior and offering the best ways to respond and to make sure that we're able to meet the unique needs of any child. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Jose and Ori. I'll just start, I'll share my screen here and just start the presentation. Okay. Here we go. So yes, thank you so much for that. My name is Kristen DeAndrea. I am an occupational therapist. I actually work for the DOE. I'm one of the OT supervisors that supervises districts in Brooklyn and in some of the other boroughs as well. And I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic that I've been wanting to expand upon for a while. Like Jose mentioned, I had presented with one of my colleagues before on different sensory strategies and different sensory techniques. And this has always been a tiny little slide embedded in that presentation. And I have just always am passionate about this topic, just the idea of understanding behavior, understanding human behavior in general. So I'm very happy to be here and to share some of what I've learned, both as an occupational therapist from my time, my time treating and working with students and adults. And then also just noticing how this translates even to my own personal life and how I've been able to work with my own children at home. So I kind of have that different perspective of the professional and personal, and how this really does make a difference when we understand behaviors and what may be impacting them. Okay, so we will get right to it. And this slide is actually one of the most important concepts I think that I will be sharing with you tonight. And it's the very first slide, but it is such an important concept. I'll just read it here. It says, all behavior communicates something. And this is, it may sound a little obvious at first, but to really understand what this is saying, that all our behaviors, all our actions are actually purposeful. And children specifically, even though it's all from adults to children, we'll talk about just children tonight, children communicate their needs through their behavior. So all behaviors serve a purpose, and the trick is finding out what your child may be getting or what they may not be getting, what they're wanting, maybe what they're not wanting. And this all can be done from observing behaviors and patterns of behaviors. And if you can determine what is motivating a behavior, and we're going to maybe be talking about more challenging behaviors here, but you can look at any type of behavior. If you can determine what is motivating that behavior, you can then best address it in a more effective way, just to meet the needs of your child and to bring about the most, the best outcome and the best type of adapting to their environment and to whatever they may be participating in. So one thing, and I'm going to read this because this is very important, all behavior communicates something. So as we look at this, there's really two, questions that I want to begin thinking about. And these are really important questions when you have a behavior that you're concerned about with your child. One of those questions is the behavior helping or hindering self-regulation? Now, self-regulation is a term many of you may be familiar with it or have heard it before. Some of you may have a really good understanding of it. Maybe there's some that this is a brand new concept to you, but self-regulation is simply the ability to control one's thoughts, feelings, and actions. So this is a skill that everyone, from children to adults, from infant to the elderly, we all use this skill of self-regulation in our lives. And there's different strategies that we have, individually have come to find best helps us to self-regulate. And there may be times when we feel dysregulated, maybe under stress, or if there's, if you had a night of little sleep, maybe if you skipped a meal or you missed a meal, you may experience, even as adults, times of dysregulation where it feels very difficult to be able to control your thoughts, your feelings, or your actions, and you need something to help. Now, typically, as adults, we have already come to find out what works for us. That may be coffee. Maybe if, like I mentioned, if you missed a night's sleep or you didn't get as many hours as you'd like, and you wake up and your arousal level is very low, maybe coffee is what helps you to self-regulate. And now you're able to conquer the activities of the day. You're able to focus at work or be able to have what you need to take adequate care of your children. So coffee is a very common strategy used to help self-regulate. Some may like exercise, like movement. Some may like different types of music. It helps calm, especially if they feel stressed or a bit out of control. A lot of times music can help to calm and regulate. And I mean, for me, something that I use often is gum even. I like to chew gum, especially at work. There is a sensory aspect to that. And another thing that I like personally, sometimes moving really helps me, even some types of fidgeting. So you can just think in your own life, the different strategies that you have used to help self-regulate, to be able to have self-control and self-management over your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And it's the same thing for children. But a lot of times, they may need help with this idea of regulating, and we can call that co-regulation. And they may need a little help if you think of an infant, a young, a baby just born, a newborn. All we do is co-regulate with them. We swaddle them, we rock them, we speak to them in a soothing tone. Those are all strategies to help them regulate and for them to learn to regulate and hopefully learn to regulate on their own as they grow older and they experience what works best for them. So all of that to just give you a little background to self-regulation. And it's really important to understand because, again, looking at this question, is the behavior helping or hindering self-regulation? Just because a behavior may look unusual doesn't mean that it isn't useful to your child. For example, what we see a lot of times in the school is students that maybe do like to move a lot. They may be rocking in their seat or switching their seating, like the way that they sit on the rug. And what we talk a lot as an occupational therapist, in my experience when I've spoken to teachers, this is something we say, is it getting in the way of their learning? Or is it maybe just something that they're using to help self-regulate, like we all do? Sometimes children pick ways that are not as socially accepted or appropriate, but they learn through, they learn over time and with support what more appropriate ways to self-regulate are. But it's really, especially at home, it's a really good question to begin asking. Is it getting in the way, or is it supporting self-regulation? And again, just because it's unusual does not mean that it's not useful. And if you have questions more about this, you can speak. There are many people in a school who are who have the ability to help you with this, support you with this. It may be related service providers. It could be an assistant principal. It could be a teacher. It could be the guidance counselor. So there are many people in your child's school who would be able to help support you with some of these questions. Okay, the next question, and this is one that we're going to actually spend the majority of this presentation on, is what is motivating the behavior? So let's assume that it is a behavior that we think is challenging and not helping the child to self-regulate, not helping them to learn and grow into, and develop. So it is something that we do want to address at home, or it might even be in school. The next question we want to ask is, what is motivating this behavior? Another way to say it is, what is the function of the behavior? Because like said in the very beginning, all behavior is communicating something, and there's a purpose there. And it's really helping to figure out what that purpose is that we can best address it. What's really interesting about this too is that the same behavior can have different motivators, and you would address them in a different way based on what that motivator is to bring about positive change. And we'll have I have some examples too that we'll explore a little more as we go through this. But I do want to just get right to these different functions of behavior. There's 4 of them that we're going to talk about today. There could be more, there are more. And I also want to say, in this presentation, it's being simplified. Obviously, all human behavior and development is very complex. And this is just a simplified way to begin looking into these different concepts. A behavior can be motivated by many different functions of behavior. But what we're looking at today is discovering what the primary motivator is, and then giving some tips on how to best address that at home. So we'll get right into it. That was a very big intro to start talking about these 4 different functions of behavior. So the first one that we'll talk about today is escape. So a behavior can be driven by the desire to escape from a non-preferred or undesirable activity or interaction. The next function of behavior is attention. Okay, so a behavior can be driven by the desire for attention from others. The third function here is tangible. And this is just the idea that a behavior can be motivated by the desire to obtain something, or to the desire for something tangible. And there are many good examples of this. Again, we'll go into detail on each one of these. And lastly, the last motivator or function of behavior that we'll speak about today is sensory. A lot of times when we talk about self-regulation, you may also hear the idea of sensory processing if it's a behavior that's driven by a sensory need. And as an OT, it's something I do love to share and talk about. So we're going to spend just a little more time on the idea of a sensory motivator for behavior at kind of towards the end of this. So we will spend a little more time there just so you can get a good idea of what that looks like. And like I said before, behaviors are complex. They can be influenced by a variety of factors, but there's usually one that is more prevalent than the others. Okay. So we are going to talk first about escape. So this is our first motivator of behavior, the idea of escape, meaning that you may see a certain behavior in a child that is there because they're trying to avoid something. Okay, so we're going to go through this like in a very structured way and talk about what it does, when does it happen, and then what can I do to support the child. So what it does, the idea of escape, it's kind of it's a little obvious, but it does remove the child from an undesired activity or interaction. For example, if you have a child who does not like to take a bath, again, we could talk about for what reason, but just when it's time for bath time, the child throws a major tantrum until they are removed from the bathroom or removed from the situation, or it's you know what, it's now too late, we're gonna not do bath time. So in this example, their behavior of tantruming is because they're escaping, they want to avoid or escape the idea of taking a bath, because it's an undesired, it's unpreferred for what many different reasons why, you know, a child may not like to do bath time. So when does this happen? The motivator of escape, it can happen when the task is too hard for them, maybe too easy, maybe boring, or too stimulating or scary. And the example of the bath, maybe it is to, maybe they have some sensitivity to the water. Maybe they prefer, you know, maybe they're non-speaking and they prefer like a certain temperature, either cooler or warmer. So for them, the bath is a very scary experience for them. Okay, so how to respond? There's different ways that you can respond when you find a behavior when it's determined to be motivated by escape. One way is to anticipate the need for that break or for the activity that they're about to engage in. So really, instead of being reactive, it's important to be proactive with escape for this very reason, because it's a non-preferred activity. You can anticipate that your child may respond in this way, that they will want to avoid or escape. So we can equip them with ways to request a break or to give them expectations of what's to come. Because a lot of times when a child does not know what the expectations are or what is happening next, it can feel very scary for them. And it could be the reason why they want to avoid or escape, especially if they've had a bad experience in the past. Maybe, again, we'll go with the bath time example. Maybe they've had a bath that was a little too hot, you know, and now they're remembering that, and it's bringing them some anxiety about getting back in the bath. So every time they see the bathtub or we're about to enter into the bathtub, they're remembering, you know, that scary experience that they had in the past. Okay, so being proactive with this is really helpful. The other idea that you can do is to divide the activity or the task into smaller parts or choices. So I'm going to give you an example on this next slide. This just gives some of those ideas. So you see right here, let's see if I can circle, if you can see this right here, where it says steps 1, 2, 3. I want it to be really simple here. There's some really fancy things online and downloadable templates, things you can print, things you can buy, but I want it to be really simple here and make it really practical, showing that you can just simply put this on like scrap paper in your house, on a napkin. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can still serve the purpose. You can use words like language. You can also use pictures that you can find in magazines, or if you are able to print, you know, you can do a Google search and print things or take a picture or, you know, cut things out of a newspaper again, or magazine or mail. There's ways to do it, but it's simply the idea of breaking up the task into the different steps so that your child is able to know what is coming next. You can, or even breaking it down may make it more tolerable for them. Another idea, you see the timers up top. Sometimes, you know, the concept of time passing it's a very difficult concept for children, really, until they get into almost like adolescent or even up to adulthood. The idea, if you ask a child, tell me when 5 minutes passes, you know, and have them start and then think and let you know, it's very difficult for them to understand how long is 5 minutes. So if we say, you know, you're taking a bath in 5 minutes, or the bath will only be 5 minutes, 5 minutes could be 2 hours to them. 5 minutes could be a whole day to them. The concept is difficult. So the idea of using a timer, there's a visual timer here, example, this one with the with the red passing of time. That's like an app that you can use on your phone, and it shows time passing, or even just from your phone, a timer where they can see that it's reducing. That can be really helpful, again, because it's giving them the anticipation or the expectation of how much time is left in an activity or how much time before transitioning to another activity. And we're talking about activities that are more non-preferred, where they will show behaviors of escape or avoidance. And then lastly on here, I just have these two examples of like a break card. This is something that is used in schools, but you can certainly use them at home. It serves the same purpose. And there's one, again, you can Google and find some images and more fancier versions, but you can also, this was my attempt at just scratching it on a piece of like an index card, just handwriting it, or a visual or a clock. Whatever it is, it's something that your child will associate with needing a break, and you can teach them how to use this. Like, we're going to work on your homework. Normally, you do not want to do your homework because it may be too hard or just not as much fun as playing video games, whatever it may be. So instead of them having a behavior, an escape or avoidance behavior, we're going to teach them how to use a break card, that you have 2 breaks during your time of homework, and you can use it whenever you want. When you go on the break, we set the timer for 5 minutes, then we return to the task. So there's different ways to do it. And these are just a few that could work well with the behaviors that are determined to be driven by the need to escape. Okay, we'll move on to attention. So a behavior can be driven by the desire for attention from others. This occurs, it can occur when maybe your child feels like they're not getting as much attention. I see it with my own children, and it's a great reminder. Sometimes when I'm attending too much to a task, they may come over and start pulling on me. They may start acting up, because at that point, that's when I run over and take care of them. There's many different behaviors that can result from them looking for attention. Not saying that you're not giving enough. It just could be, it could be that they just want more, or a certain kind for some reason. So attention, when does this behavior possibly occur? Well, it provides access to people or interactions, and it can occur whenever that social interaction is wanted. So, there may not be a rhyme or reason to it. It's just a good indicator is if the behavior stops once they're receiving the attention maybe that they're looking for. Okay, so a way to respond to this is just providing positive reinforcement for the desired behaviors. Again, with attention, what I can find both professionally and personally, what can happen is oftentimes we reinforce an unwanted behavior. It's called negative or positively reinforcing a negative behavior. So we're reinforcing an unwanted behavior. And the way that we do that is if a child is acting up, or maybe being very loud and screaming, maybe at home, maybe you're on the phone, whatever it may be, and the child has a behavior where they're being very loud. But every time they're loud, you hang up the phone. I gotta go. You hang up the phone and you turn to your child and you show them attention, whatever it may be. You go and help them with whatever they need help with. You speak to them, you give a hug, you begin doing whatever they had wanted to do. Sometimes, that's necessary, of course, but thinking about it, the child was behaving, say, with the loud screaming because they wanted the attention from you. And by hanging up your call, what you were doing, and then providing the attention, you're reinforcing the behavior. Now, every time you get on a phone call, the child may know, if I scream, mommy's going to hang up and pay attention to me. So that's just an example of how a behavior may be motivated by attention. Now, the how to respond piece here would be just, first of all, the awareness of it, because that's really important. Otherwise, you may be reinforcing more unwanted behaviors. So once you once you can identify that this behavior is motivated by attention, you can then decide to positively reinforce the desired behaviors. So for example, let's say that we're using the phone call example. If you're on the phone and your child is quiet now for any length of time, you may say, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. Look how quiet you're being. Or mommy will be with you or daddy will be with you in a minute. Once I'm off this phone call, I'm so proud of you. So just the idea of reinforcing the desired behaviors. Thinking of another example, if not maybe necessarily on the phone, again, but you see a behavior where maybe you're making dinner or whatever it may be, and the child is now acting up in some way that requires you to move towards them or to engage. Maybe they're playing, they want you to play with them, and they're tugging on you, and now you go, okay, and you go and play. Just getting that concept that there is they're communicating in some way, and then you're responding in some way, and just being more thoughtful about responding when they're communicating in a more positive way. So you may say, I don't like when you tug on my shirt. If you would like my help, you can say, or you can place your hand on my hand, whatever is acceptable to you, because this is all very individualized. You can just teach and reinforce and enforce more of the positive behavior with your praise and your response. Okay, so that is for attention. And here's just an example too of different ways to provide positive reinforcement for those desired behaviors when they're being driven by the need for attention. So one in this top photo up here, I hope you can see this laser pointer because I'm circling the top picture of the son and his father maybe doing homework. And it's just plainly giving the child attention at different times. You can be proactive in this way as well when you see the need, when the child maybe is wanting that attention, being a little proactive and maybe just giving them more of that quality attention. And that's something too, as a working mother, I think about a lot, the idea of quality versus quantity, meaning I may not always be able to give them my full attention 24 hours a day as a working mother. However, I can be very intentional about the quality of my attention and giving them whatever I'm able to give, making sure that I am paying attention and being very focused on their needs at that time. That goes a really long way. I think it weighs even more than the quantity, meaning spending more time that's not focused and not intentional, weighs a lot less. It's not as good as spending the quality time that you have with them. So that's a picture, just kind of demonstrating that. Another is here. There's two examples here. Here's another. You see a checklist on a fridge and a sticker chart on a fridge. These are really simple, really inexpensive ways to show positive reinforcement. Some kids love praise. They love when you say their name, and they love giving high fives and hugs and tickles and you're awesome. And I can't believe, what a great job. You tried so hard. So praise, verbal praise is a positive reinforcer. Some kids love that. Another type of reinforcer is like a sticker chart. Some kids love receiving something even as simple as a sticker. Or even here you could see like a check mark, depending again on what your child seems to respond to, maybe the age of your child. An older child, may be okay with check boxes, may love stickers as well. It just depends what your child responds best to. But there's so many ways to positively reinforce, and it all depends on what your child prefers. Okay, so we're going to move to the tangible motivator of behavior. Okay, so what does it do? This one I think is really the most obvious. It allows the child to obtain, or it provides the preferred item or activity that your child wants. So it's really obvious. We're talking about something tangible, like in this picture, it's an iPad. Okay, it could be a favorite toy car. It could be money. Thinking of the older child. It could be anything that's tangible that they would like to have. Okay, so that's what it does. When does it occur? When does it happen? It happens whenever they want that preferred item or the activity that they want. So thinking of like a toy car. Your child may love playing with this specific car. They love to hold it. They love to carry it around. They bring it everywhere. If you go somewhere where they're not allowed to have this car for whatever reason, or they lose the car, when they don't have it, that's where they become very upset. The behavior may occur, crying, screaming, just misbehaving. And that may be because they want their car and they're either not allowed to have it or they lost it, they don't have it anymore. That's where you would see the behavior. And a really good clue that a behavior is driven by the need or the want for something tangible is that when the object is given to them, the behaviors stop. And we see that all the time. And sometimes it's unavoidable. I've done this again. I'm just giving some personal stories as well. This has happened, you're out in public and your child, wherever you may be, where there needs to be lower volume and your child is crying, upset, wants something. There have been times when I have just given the child whatever they have had wanted because the behavior immediately stops. It's what they wanted. And at that time, it was a means of survival for myself because I couldn't have them, acting in that way. Sometimes that happens, but if it was a behavior that I really wanted to make a change for them, because they have to learn that I can't act out or cry or misbehave every time I want something. Again, we don't want to positively reinforce an unwanted behavior. So there will have to be some learning that occurs. Sometimes it's best to do it inside the house. And then you can slowly carry that over in different environments if it's just not reasonable to teach a big lesson outside of the home, where there may be screaming and tantruming for a while. But again, that's up to you and your child. But just as an example, I wanted to share that with you. So how to respond? So there are different behavioral modification strategies that can be used to facilitate different things like waiting or sharing or not having. There's just some times where you can't have what you want, and that's a really good life lesson to have. So I'll show you some pictures here of some of these different strategies. One is a first then board right up here, and we use this a lot in the schools. And it's something so simple that why not use them in the homes? Again, you can print something out, we can have things laminated, really fancy, but you don't have to. It's simply a piece of paper that you can just draw two squares, first, then. And the idea is that you give them something to do first, and then they get their preferred activity or object. I find that this is really helpful because, again, it gives an expectation. They know what they have to do first in order to get what they want. What else I like about this is it basically is kind of like a compromise where they may want something that's not harmful to them if it's their truck, but if you want to teach the lesson of waiting or of following directions, it just allows them to have what they want in a more structured way. And then you can carry this over with most things. And again, I'm going to show you more of an example in a little bit of what that could actually look like. But the first then board is excellent. So you give them an expectation, whatever that may be. It could be eating dinner. So you can write the word dinner in there. You can draw a picture of a dinner plate. You can have them draw a picture. And then the after, so first dinner, then truck, or then car, or then iPad, whatever it may be. And remember, the use of those timers are really helpful as well. But this gives them that expectation. So another idea is just a simple checklist like this. It doesn't have to say I'm working for, it can just show a picture. It could say I'm doing my best for this, maybe an example, that can be used in school. Possibly we use a lot of these similarly, like in the classrooms, but it could be I'm trying my best for, and it could be the picture of the car, the drawing of the truck. And here, this gives them a certain, again, an expectation of what's expected of them. And it allows you to either use stickers. I showed pictures of coins up here, like pennies. You can really use any items, Cheerios. You can even just have somebody color something in. but it shows them that after maybe, well, this is 10. So maybe it's after 10 bites, I'm all done and I get my desirable, I get my iPad, I get my truck, whatever it is that you find appropriate. So you can incorporate both of these. We not only give them the first then, so first is dinner, then iPad, but we also say, okay, now at dinner, I'm going to be eating, like doing these tasks, trying my best for the iPad, and I have 10 bites, and then I get my desirable. So it's just ways to help structure their wants. And again, you can do this very simply on anything that you have in the home, like as long as you're able to kind of write on it. You can use a whiteboard, you can use washable dry erase markers on windows. Even kids love that, as long as it's erasable, you're able to use that as long as it's something that your child will not transfer over to writing on walls. But many kids, they really do enjoy that. It's a novelty idea. And then using, again, any little thing like this to kind of mark as time passes or as they complete one of those tasks or one of those expectations. Okay. So here we are to sensory. This is one that is really important to look out for. And again, if you need any help or have more questions about this, there are many people in your school who will be equipped to help answer, or they can at least lead you, give you the best person to contact with that. Because when we talk about sensory, I just want to give a little background to this, because there are many behaviors that are driven by a sensory need. And if you try to address it in a different way, you may actually make it worse. So it is good to have that understanding. So the sensory systems, when we talk about sensory systems, there's actually 8 of them. There's a few of them, 1 through 5, that help us process the world around us, like our vision, our taste, our smell, our hearing, our touch. There are also sensory systems within our bodies that help us process what's going on inside of us, in the world inside of us. That's our vestibular, our proprioceptive, and our interoception system. So this is a whole nother presentation, is based around this slide now. I'm not going to go into much detail of this, but I just wanted to bring a little context to our sensory processing. So all of these different sensory systems have to work together to help process this information within our brain. So sensory processing is the act by which our bodies take in information from our environment and use it to produce an adaptive or meaningful response. Now, difficulties with sensory processing, this can arise when the brain has trouble understanding, organizing, or prioritizing this information. So this is an extremely complex process. And the brain is an amazing, amazing organ, okay? There are a lot of things that can go wrong in the processing based on a sensory need. It can also be based, like we talked before a little earlier, about stress, nutrition, sleep. So there are a lot of things that impact our ability to process sensory information, but it could be some trouble with registration, which is the receiving of information, but also with the processing, which is the organizing and the understanding of the information in the brain. Okay, so again, these are some slides that we use in the more detailed sensory presentation, but I did want to just speak a little bit about the idea of big cup versus little cup. It basically is imagery used to describe the idea of our sensory threshold, which means with our sensory systems, we can take in a lot of information from the environment, say from our auditory system, so our hearing. We may take in a lot of information from our ears, from our hearing, but there comes a point where it becomes too overwhelming, and that would be our sensory threshold. And there's a typical sensory threshold for everybody, where if the fire alarm goes off, that's really loud. Most people hearing it may cover their ears or experience something uncomfortable because it's so loud. That's why it is loud, because it needs to alarm you that there's something wrong. But that's like a typical sensory threshold. But there are some children who have a high sensory threshold. And we would use the imagery of a big cup. Basically, that means it takes a lot of information to fill the cup. So it's a high sensory threshold. So they may need more, like, for example, that idea of an alarm, a fire alarm, they may not even respond to it because it didn't hit their threshold yet. It may be so high, it may take such intense sensory input because it's such a big cup that they haven't even hit the threshold and the brain has not registered that an alarm is going off. Okay. In contrast, we would talk about a little cup where now the sensory threshold is so low that it takes very little for them to feel overwhelmed. And if we're looking at the same example of hearing, so little that they can't, that even just like some singing, like whispering, bothers them. And that's a very extreme example. But just to get the idea that with a little cup, only very little sensory input is needed, and then it may put them in a state of their nervous system for fight, flight, or fright, which basically means that they are in a state where they feel unsafe and their body gets into this protective state where they just want to get away or remove themselves from an experience because their body is telling them, we are unsafe here. We have to get out of here. And it's something that they will feel, and it is considered a protective response for survival. So they will feel feelings of being very unsafe and out of control. Okay, so looking back at sensory now with that very little bit of background on sensory processing, a sensory motivator of behavior could occur. Usually it's when they prefer a different sensory experience that feels good. So they'll seek it out in their environment. It may be moving. Movement really feels good to them. So they're always on the move because they need a lot of that input to meet that sensory threshold. It could be they love hugs because the feeling of being wrapped up tight in a hug is giving them what they need. I see a lot, there's some kids that actually love music. It's a preferred sensory experience. So they're constantly putting their ear close to a speaker or a cell phone, anything where there's sounds coming from. So when does it happen? Anytime, even when alone, and it's often used to self-regulate. And how to respond. So this is an area where you would say that you would ask really that question, is it used to self-regulate? Is it really impacting or a problem behavior? Versus, is it just something unusual or something that we need to teach a little variation of so they get the same input, the same needs that they have in order to self-regulate in a different, like more socially acceptable way? And that can look different from family to family on what they decide is acceptable. In the schools, we have more of like kind of what is acceptable and what's not. It's a little more straightforward. But at home, it could look different. Like talking in a loud voice could be completely acceptable and not a behavior that we would want to change. Versus like in another family, that may not be acceptable. So it really is dependent on the family. So for sensory, the way that you can address this is, again, providing these experiences that help fill their cup and help them to self-regulate. And I just want to share with you a few that are like no fail. They work to help calm a child, also they help to increase or to bring alertness to a child who may be more withdrawn and of lower energy level. All these activities are really good no matter if they need calming or alerting. So some of these that you can see, there's something we called heavy work activities. That's like this little girl here holding a basket. It just has some weight to it, and it basically wakes up the body and sends messages to the brain on where their body is in space, and in turn sends some chemical, like coping chemicals throughout so that they're able to feel good inside. Their body can feel good. So anything that requires push or pull, resistance, like carrying a weighted laundry basket or pushing a weighted laundry basket, provides those sensors, that input that also leads to the production of coping chemicals. Movement is extremely important. This can be on the playground or even during like different like yoga or stretch activities. movement is excellent. If you can fit that in before school in some way or after school in some way, that it will never do you wrong, as long as you're using activities, again, like hanging from like a playground bar or a chin-up bar, that provides that same type of calming input and regulating input to your child. Deep breathing is really helpful, teaching how to belly breathe or calm and regulate through breathing. Also, like over here, there's a child wearing headphones. That can be helpful too if you're trying to screen out some noise that is upsetting. Again, here's some deep pressure, just plainly with a pillow that you can use. Crunchy snacks is really good. It gives oral input to help calm and regulate, as well as drinking through like a straw cup. Okay, so we have just a few minutes. I wanted to quickly go through these few examples because I think it'll help bring this all together. And I wish I could hear your voice in responding, but I'll give you the answer for this little behavior quiz. So the first one is, this will give a scenario, then we'll think about what is driving that behavior. So Violet begins to scream and cry when served food seated at the dinner table. She immediately stops once given an iPad and will eat while watching cartoons. So thinking about this scenario, she has a behavior, the screaming, the not eating. Once she's given the iPad, it stops. She stops screaming and she begins to eat. So thinking about this, what could be driving the behavior? If you thought of tangible, the need to obtain something, you're right. And just a quick way to maybe work on this issue with little Violet would be using the first then board, saying first dinner, we're going to eat, then iPad, and then show her some, like, you know, how many bites along the way, or just showing the expectation that you're almost there, you have 5 more bites left, or whatever that may be. Okay, next example. We have Derek runs and hides under his bed every time that he's asked to brush his teeth. So we have an ask, we want him to brush his teeth, and he runs and hides under his bed. So thinking about this, if you're thinking about the idea of escape, that he's looking to get away from brushing his teeth, you would be right. Derek is certainly trying to avoid the activity of brushing teeth. So some ways that for Derek, we can work on this through the idea of helping him to cope with the idea of brushing his teeth. We can have this visual like checklist on the side. It's actually like a visual schedule where it gives him that expectation. We put on our pajamas, then we're going to brush our teeth. So he's preparing himself for that task. Another is to use like a timer, like we said on the phone, and so you can slowly increase the amount of time. If Derek never brushes his teeth, or he brushes it for 15 seconds one night, that's better than nothing. And we can slowly increase that time. And then another thing is keep it fun. Maybe just something like introducing a fun new toothbrush, or something that is motivating for him in a character that he likes, that could also help too. Okay, so here is our second to last. So Justice tends to be more aggressive with his little sister when his father's around. He will hit her, then receives a talk and timeout by his father's side. So we see the behavior, we see what happens after. And with this scenario, we would think attention. It's possible that he's just seeking that talk and that time with his dad following the behavior. So something with here, it would just be showing, really using that really positive praise when he's doing the right thing, when he's playing nicely with his sister, maybe even recognizing him when he's doing the right thing through a sticker chart, like Justice was caught being kind, you know, and really finding those times, really kind of even creating scenarios where you can encourage him during that. And then lastly, Fadila hates wearing socks, and it's always a struggle getting her shoes on and out the door in time for school. Wearing sandals does not seem to be a problem. This could be a reaction to a sensory need that she has. That, you know, sometimes the tags or the seams on socks could be very aggravating if she has a sensitivity to touch or tactile input. And just a few ideas, they have seamless socks that she can use. You can turn socks inside out. So it's just a way to like modify what you're asking and turning the socks inside out so the seam doesn't touch your skin. Or lastly, this is something where does it really matter? And maybe she just wears sandals, you know, or goes sockless. So just giving some ideas on how to respond and examples of behavior. So I know I really thought, I wasn't sure how long this content was going to take. As you can tell, I love talking about it. And it's just very interesting. I think it's so helpful to grasp this concept of, what is motivating the behavior, and asking yourself that question and knowing that all behavior communicates something. So with that, I thank you so much. And Ori, I'm done. I know we may have just a minute or two if there are any questions that
We
anybody has.
I have some questions.
Hey, Jose, hi.
Hi, but I wanted to highlight something that you were saying throughout the presentation. It's very much, if folks want to think of things, that actions are reactions. And so I think one of the things that you talked about was around promoting positive behavior, right? In particular, when you were talking about like if then boards and then schedules and all of those things. And so for those wondering, all of those resources are up on our website, and we can share a link with you all on things to download, all those things. But I wanted to say that, and Kristen, you've said this before, that it's really important when you're using these strategies to build trust with your child. So if you're going to use it, follow through, right? Like you can't say, oh, we're working off of 10 check marks, and your child gets to 9, and then they do something wrong, and then they do the 10 and say, no, but because that time you didn't do it, you don't get your reward, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I'm glad you brought that up. It's super important. And this is something, consistency, but also follow through. Those are two things I highly suggest that makes this successful. And as a parent, you can be very careful in deciding what is reasonable and what you can offer. If you can't take the child out, if ice cream outside the house is not a reasonable reward or way to reinforce, don't tell your child that you will do that. You can be very simple with it, and follow through is extremely important. And create, especially in the beginning, creating opportunities for them to be successful is priceless. So if you have a child that has a behavior that's like, well, they're never doing the right thing, so I can never positively reinforce. I would say that's not true. Even if you can find a second in between the crying that they're not, you can positively reinforce that and build upon it. So it's so important to create those opportunities, and even lower your expectations. Instead of like that board I showed with 10 times, 10 bites to eat, 10 minutes of whatever, start off really slow. Just do one, and then and you're building that trust, and you're building that idea that this is something that I am doing and I'm receiving from it. So it's that relationship that there's the consistency and the follow through, and you can always build upon it. So it's very important in the beginning to make sure that that fabricate like ways that your child will succeed. Then you can get a little more challenging with what your expectations are.
And it's just like, it's something you just said was actually really good around framing expectations. For people who are like, I'm never getting these positive behaviors out of my kid. Maybe you need to reframe what those positive behaviors you're looking for should be. And I think a really good example of that was the toothbrushing situation, where you said something like 15 seconds is better than not brushing your teeth at all, right? And then slowly grow in increments and as you're able to tolerate it more, right? So I think that's amazing. I also think that one of the things that like an easy way for people to follow is like, for when setting rewards, you're setting the reward you think your child wants. And I think reward systems work best when the child's involved in the like reward process. So like, and maybe you don't want to like overstimulate them with 6,000 things, right? But you're like, hey, for your then, do you want 5 minutes of iPad time, or do you want an Oreo? Like,
Yes.
and like help them and like give them some like framing choices. But if they choose the reward, then guess what? They're more likely to be invested in getting the task done, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really important part. And it gives the child, all they want, they think they know it all, right? They want to be independent, and giving them a choice allows them to feel like they have a say in things, which is really important, and it builds their confidence and resiliency for later on in life. So structuring it, we're saying, first this, then what would you like to do? And so you're giving them your expectations, saying this is happening in a structured way. I'm defining this in this way. This happens first, but then you get to decide what comes next. So it really helps, like you said, really building that trust relationship. I'm going to add that as a slide. Thanks, Jose. Is really, really important. And giving them the choice helps build that self-advocacy and the idea that they have a say in what happens in their life. And that's really important. But it's all done in a structured way. So it's kind of like a way to it's a win-win, really, and building that relationship and that trust, which is so important for future, as your relationship grows with your child into adolescent, teenage years, even adult years, that foundation of building that relationship of trust and follow through and choice and all of these concepts, super important.
Kristen, thanks so much for joining today. Thanks for doing this. There's more that I could say about self-regulation, but I don't want to get too much into that, because next week we have Ann Buckley-Reen, who's going to be joining us, who's going to talk about that. And so really excited. So if you want to continue learning more about self-regulation, join us again next week, same time, same new link for those of you who joined. But until then, stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Have a great night.